Let's- All right, so let's get started. So let's raise our glass. Everybody raise your glass and chin chin. The way we do this is we clank the clank your camera. That's our cheers.
Thank you.
Cheers. Chin chin. So let's get right into it. Since Brian and Tracy are also professionals in the wine industry, having their own wine bar in Connecticut.
With a
What are you
closed
tasting
restaurant.
when you taste this wine, Brian and Tracy?
What do you think?
Cherries. Surprising. I don't
For
know.
Chenin Blanc.
Maybe it's because the vodka.
Maybe because the vodka's fine.
You're getting a hint of maraschino.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's anybody else tasting on this when they taste this?
Very crisp, by the way.
Yeah.
Nice.
I do like it.
Almost like some pineapple.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, some pineapple. Anyone else? Yeah.
Maybe probably shouldn't be eating these jerk-style plantains.
The vodka.
Yeah. Get a big nose in there. Yeah, definitely some pineapple, some tropical fruit.
It smells really good.
Very crisp. This is a delicious wine coming to you all the way from Berkeley, California.
Nice.
So I want to introduce you all to Chris Brocway from Broc Cellars. Chris is on his iPhone at home, I believe.
Yep.
So Chris, tell us a bit about this wine and how it's made and your philosophy on wine here.
Well, I mean, it's made in Berkeley, so this is probably the closest vineyard to kind of our winery, kind of in the flatlands of Berkeley. This is from an area called Solano County Green Valley. So it's about 35 minutes from our winery. So it's almost kind of like there's like a string of 3 vineyards we kind of source from this small valley that's about 3 miles long and 1 mile wide. So it's kind of a forgotten little valley, just kind of wedged right in between, just southeast of Napa Valley, if that kind of helps people that aren't familiar with the area kind of place it. And it's kind of like a little area that's kind of been forgotten because it's so small. I think people just kind of drive by it. And this vineyard, this is our second vintage of Chenin from Fry Vineyard in Green Valley. So basically the grower had some Pinot Gris, and I don't have anything against Pinot Gris except this small little block was not producing any grapes. And I had the idea that maybe we'll get some cuttings, graft a little Chenin. Chenin likes to throw a lot of grapes. So I thought this would be a good solution, and it turned out it worked. So we actually have the opposite problem now. It throws a lot of grapes, so we have to prune it quite a bit. But we got these beautiful Chenin Blanc cuttings, you know, kind of like these small sticks from a vineyard that was planted with Chenin in 1979 up in Amador County. And a winemaker called Tegan Pasalacqua works with this vineyard called Story Vineyard. So one spring we went out there, got a bunch of cuttings and grafted them, removed the Pinot Gris that wasn't producing any grapes and grafted on the Chenin. So Chenin has a little bit of a history in California, but the problem is most of it's been torn out once Chardonnay kind of took off. All these early 70s plantings of Chenin Blanc are now all gone. And I love Chenin Blanc. So every time I talk to a farmer about, hey, can we maybe plant some Chenin? They're like, oh, you know, we tore that out 10 years ago. I'm not planting it again, or something like that. So a lot of these original plantings when Vouvray was big in the 70s are now gone when it's, you know, things like Kindle Jacks and Chardonnay and things like that started to take off, and people started planting a lot more Chardonnay. So, and
Yeah. So what I'll do, Chris, is I'm gonna share my screen here so everyone can see where Green Valley is. This is on the link that I sent today. So for those of you, like, so here's Napa here, right on the map. Green Valley is, just if you go to Napa across the Bay Bridge, you're basically just east of or just west of Green Valley. So, and then you're passing Green Valley if you're going to Tahoe. That's how close it is to sort of Napa Valley where everybody is planning these things.
yeah, yeah. And you have to call it Solano County Green Valley on the wine label, because there's actually 2 Green Valleys in California. There's a Green Valley kind of up in Russian River, and then there's this one in Solano County. So you have to, designate it as Solano County Green Valley, just so it doesn't get confused. But this was a year before the other, so it's the original Green Valley, I guess. But we get a lot of things: Old Vine, Carignan, Valdegui, Chenin Blanc, a little bit of Cab, and a little bit of Syrah from that area.
Yeah, that's cool. So when you graft the Chenin onto the rootstock, how long does it take for that new graft to start producing fruit that you can make wine with?
There was fruit that year, but we didn't make any wine out of it. We just kind of, dropped it, figuring it's too young. But you actually can get some grapes, not a lot of grapes, but you can get some grapes out of there. And there's a few clusters, but the next year you can start actually, it's different when you plant vines, and it's like 3 years. When you graft, you can get grapes the following year.
Oh, cool. Awesome. Does anyone have a question for Chris? You can also type them in the chat, and then we can sort of call on you to ask it out.
Yeah, and then the most obvious thing about this wine. Oh, sorry.
Oh.
What are your tasting notes on it?
We kind of wanted to capture the wine in like a certain moment. So as you can tell, kind of by looking at it, completely unfiltered. We bottled it kind of young, but it does have some unusual flavors, not just for Chenin, but for white wine. So that somebody mentioned cherries earlier. There is like almost kind of like a little bit of like a red fruit, or kind of like even maybe a little bit of like red apple skin that you kind of get into the wine. And then you have that area of Green Valleys. It does have like a big influence from the bay. So there's like some cooling breezes, but you do have warm days sometimes. So you do get a little bit of that tropical kind of apricot, pineapple kind of note. And probably the most typical thing Chenin, like from Loire Valley is known for, is kind of like what they call like a woolliness. And it has just a hint of like that classic kind of Chenin Blanc kind of woolliness to it. So it's kind of an interesting combination of things. And it also it's all barrel aged. It's basically barrel fermented and barrel aged in almost every size barrel we have in the winery. So 60-gallon barrels, 79-gallon barrels, 660-gallon Hungarian ovals, and then a little bit of what we call sandstone jars from this gentleman, Patrick, in Bordeaux. So it has almost like this amphora, a little bit's done in like these amphoras that are above ground, kind of made out of what they call grès, G-R-E-S, which is kind of like a very sandstone rich kind of terracotta.
Yeah. All right, cool. So now we're getting into some of the questions about what is natural wine. So,
oh boy.
So in the chat, so the big one. So since it's the first of the 6 tastings, this is going to be fun. There's a bunch of people here who have never had natural wine before, or maybe only had it if I've brought them a bottle. Some people have had it a few times. So what's going to be nice? We're going to ask this question to all 6 producers, and I think everyone has a slightly different take on it. So people who attend all of these are going to get different opinions. So let's take it away, Chris. What?
Well, I mean, it's kind of a topic. I mean, it's a re-emerging topic, but it's a big topic right now, just because they actually kind of legally defined it in France. So it's natural wine. I've always been, why define it? Why put up this kind of narrow view of what it is? And I like the more creative side of natural wine, where it's more about kind of a living thing, and whoever's making and where it's grown and all this, kind of a living expression. But now, and there was just an article in the New York Times about what they call, the Vin method, nature or natural.
Yeah, I can't pronounce it in French either.
Yeah. And, they put down some pretty good basic definitions, even though I'm not sure I'm necessarily for the labeling of it this way, but their definitions are good. It's organic grapes, no sulfur in the fermenter, all native all native yeasts have to be used. You can't buy yeast from a lab and introduce it to the wine. So what you're encouraging is whatever kind of the microflora is on the grape skins in your winery kind of starts and finishes your fermentation. And
it's really like, I like to describe it to people as it's especially in the Bay Area, where we love our sourdough out here. It's like making sourdough with the native yeast. You just mix flour and water until all of a sudden you have a sourdough starter. That's the same way native yeast works in wine. You crush it up, but eventually the sugar is going to grab the yeast and spontaneously ferment and start making wine rather than inoculating it.
Yeah, and a lot of these yeasts and bacteria are living on the skins of the grapes, and these yeast and bacteria are on these skins from a certain spot because the climate, the environment, the soil, everything kind of encourages something unique. So what's on the grape skins from one place is not going to be necessarily exactly the same as skins from another place. Just depending on the weather, humidity, wind, all these things. So the idea is you're kind of creating a unique expression as opposed to adding something that maybe contributes more to the expression than you want it to. But that said, our winery, after so many years, has something to say about it as well. So, there's things living on the wall, there's things on the ceiling, there's things that after multiple harvests start to build up, and we don't discourage that. So I think there's something unique to our winery as well. And, like a lot of places, we're surrounded by breweries now, but hopefully that doesn't float over too much.
Yeah. There's actually one of the other controversies with some of these co-ops are for people like in the natural wine world is if people are trying to use their native yeast in a warehouse that shares with somebody who ferments, they're commingling. Yeast do not social distance, as they say.
Right. But it's an exciting time right now in California, because I feel like when I started making wine in 2002, so this is like 17, 18 years in now. And everybody seemed to be back then trying to make the same wine. There's very parameters, and bigger is better. And there's a place for those wines, but now there's more variety. There's more people experimenting. There's more people working with little known grapes, using different fermentation methods. So I think it's an exciting time, not because somebody's doing only this or only that, but there's a lot of people coming up with their own unique expressions of wine. So I think it's just a fun time to be making wine.
Yeah. Tom's asking, do you have to treat natural wine any differently in terms of storage or temperature? Or what would you do differently with a natural wine than you would do with a conventional Chenin Blanc at this point?
Well, I mean, our winery is basically, it's an old warehouse. We put in some drains, some hot water, and we just start making wine there. There's nothing special or unique about it, except it's in an urban environment. But with natural wines, you have to be a little bit more careful because you're operating without a safety net, so to speak. So you're not adding a lot of sulfur, which helps, protect the wine. And so you can alleviate some concerns that way. We're not using any temperature control. So we have to be careful not to let basically you want very clean, healthy grapes. And you want to give those grapes a nice home because you're a little bit of like a shepherd. You're shepherding these wines along. You're a parent. You try to provide a safe environment, a clean environment. Is kind of, everybody's going to have a different answer, but this is kind of how I view it. So what they're going into, we have to make sure is really clean. So we're not introducing something to the wine that can take off and spoil the wine. And you have to make sure the grapes are very clean, because if there's any kind of rot or mildew, that can, affect your fermentation and the health of your wine as well. So
Yeah.
you're basically just operating without a safety net. And you have to kind of prepare.
Yeah, that's the one thing that's impressed me about seeing how natural winemakers produce their wine. Even though some of them are in garages or whatever, their equipment and everything is spotless and spectacular and just very well maintained, because there is no margin for error.
Right. But there's other producers that feel the opposite, just like whatever's here and whatever's that, it's all going together, and some manage to make just some beautiful wines, and some take a detour sometimes.
Yeah.
So everybody has their different methods.
Yeah, great. So Brian, you have a question? You can ask it. I don't need to read your chat.
So we talked about France's guidelines around natural wine. Where do you see California? Will California be pigeonholed into this French definition of natural wine?
And how does that impact?
And how does that impact production?
Yeah.
I'm not against it, but I'm not, kind of raising the natural wine labeling flag either. Right now it's not mandatory in France. It's kind of like a voluntary thing that they're kind of trying out, from what I understand, like for a few years or something. Even they might even, and then they're going to review it later on. Overall, I don't think it would negatively affect us. One point that Eric Asimov kind of touched upon in his article, and one of the concerns I have, is the way bigger companies can maybe manipulate things and use them to their advantage, and kind of dictate things. And you see it a little bit just like with organic certification, right? They kind of come up with some definitions, and then they kind of skew them a little bit one way to kind of make it easier for people to fudge them a little bit. I think it would be nice to have some kind of voluntary labeling. I think that would be a good thing to let people know, like, hey, this is from organic grapes, because that's one of the hardest things, I think, for people to decipher and to know about wines, because it's very difficult to put it on the label. We work with a lot of organic, either certified or non-certified vineyards, but we're not allowed to necessarily tell people that, because our winery is not certified. We're working on our certification this year, even though we're basically just a warehouse. We have to get our winery certified in order to tell people that they're drinking certified organic grapes. So if there's something that could make it easier, I'm for it. I don't think there's any kind of threat to California, but it would be its own labeling system, or the French society that started it could maybe offer it in California. I think would be something interesting.
I think it would be good to have guidelines because, because of the vague definition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I understand. I go back and forth on it quite a bit.
Yeah.
I like thinking of more the follow your own path kind of things, but then there's also the end result on a shelf, and it would be nice for besides talking to your wine shop or looking who's the importer on the back or distributor or something like that, it would be nice to have some kind of signification of just what it is and what's in the bottle.
So what we're trying to do right now is we have to rethink ourselves because New York is on lockdown until Connecticut,
As you guys are.
as you are too, until May 20th. So we were going to offer bottle service only. Like, here's the bottle, you open it up, you do what you want. You're 6 feet away from me. Everything's been sanitized. I think it'll be more of a time for people to sit down and enjoy like a bottle of wine. And I think if there's a story behind it on the label, I think people would be much more interested.
Right.
I could tell you that on the East Coast, people don't really care about natural wine or biodynamic. They just,
Not yet.
it's all about the social aspect of it. But I think now it'll change. Yeah, it'll change because they'll have time to sit there.
Yeah. And people can examine what they're drinking a little bit more and get to know their wine and get to know their record collection and examine a lot of things. Yeah.
Yeah. Get to know their walls.
Broc, I have a quick question. Have your sales gone up since COVID?
Well, I mean, some specific sales have gone down and other sales have gone up. So we rely heavily on distribution. We're in like I guess I've been making wine since 2002 and we've been slowly building. We were in like 45 states, maybe almost 44. And we're in like 12, 13, 14 different countries. And that has taken a nosedive, right? So it's, places are closed, economies are suffering, that's dropped probably by easily over 50%. And now our direct to consumer, which, we've been working on building up and making a bigger portion of what we do, has skyrocketed. I mean, it's been unbelievable. And when we're doing two things about it, we're delivering in the Bay Area, so people can order wine, we'll bring it to them, drop it on their doorstep, send them a text and go, hey, you got wine on your front porch, and then also just shipping across the country. And so it's I keep worrying it's going to stop, but people are still drinking. I thought maybe people would start dry January over again or something after about 4 weeks, but the response has been unbelievable. I don't know if it makes up for all that lost distribution, but it's definitely keeping the lights on. We have all our employees, they're all working, they're just working a little differently right now. So and it's I've seen some wineries just kind of roll over. They're like, well, that's it. This, and then I've seen other wineries step up and kind of get creative and just kind of redo how they do their day-to-day business.
That's who thrives.
Yeah. And then, on the East Coast, there's no bottle shops. The laws in California are much more lax than they are in the
It surprises people sometimes.
Well, and I find that what this is going to do now is loosen those laws up a little bit because, it was a law in Connecticut. If you were not we're package stores is what you call it in New England, where you buy liquor and wine. And if you were in a package store, you were not allowed to have them leave the bar with the wine. So now, I think this is going to open it up to a bigger audience now.
Yeah.
Have people leave with cocktails.
We can have people leave with cocktails
That
now, which
seems
you've never been.
dangerous.
I mean, it's like New Orleans.
Right.
But I think the beauty of it is these liquor stores, package stores, and wine stores sales have gone up by about 35% on the East Coast. So
yeah.
I
So
think
one of the
this is
things that
great.
Sorry,
Chris?
go ahead, Ryan.
Chris, no.
No, go ahead. I thought you were done.
No, kind of am.
All right. So Chris, how many virtual tastings have you done in the last 3 weeks?
We've done quite a bit. Sometimes we've done a lot of Instagram Live where since we're not hanging out with our friends, we'll ship them some of our wine, they'll ship us some of their wine, we'll try it together and make pizzas or something like that. And then we've had a lot of private tastings as well, kind of like what we're doing right now. So it's been kind of a mix. So it's been fun, but I'm just trying to keep track of them all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen you on Instagram Live a few times. And so I had a virtual tasting with another producer with my prior club that was already out, and that was one of the first ones people had done. And now it's people are double booked and triple booked now. It's amazing.
Well, it's great because you have a captive audience.
Yeah. It's great. The other thing that's really interesting about, particularly I think natural wine, when you're doing these virtual tastings, is natural wine more than conventional wine has a lot of bottle variation, which is one of the reasons. And I won't say a lot of bottle variation, but it's more prone to bottle variation. So it's one of the reasons why I'm really interested in starting off asking people what they're tasting. So some people, like, you may get some cherry or sour apple on it. Someone else may get some pineapple and may not get the other notes. And that may be 100% correct, right? One may, so there could be that little variation depending on, especially if it's being shipped across the country. Your bottles have had made a 3,000-mile journey, where other people's I hand delivered to Mill Valley on Saturday. So did it. So,
That gorilla box packing is
there
awesome.
you go.
We're enjoying the wine very much.
Yeah.
Some people got hand deliveries. But also, we also have another guest here, and this came out of one of our last conversations. And one of the prior things is that one of the cool things about natural wine is the labels and the art. So natural wine tends to have little hipper, fun, just more branded labels rather than what we normally associate with the stuffy old like wine labels that are more about AOC and all of that. So we actually have the designer of this label here. Marta designed this label for Broc Cellars. So everybody give Marta a little round of applause or welcome.
Who's Marta? Who's Marta?
So you can also use the reactions.
Hi.
the reactions on Zoom here. So really happy. Like one of my goals is also to bring, people talked about, mentioned listening to vinyls. So like there's a huge correlation between vinyl records and natural wine bars. And so, but also just, the art of natural wine and bringing art community back into this community of local producers, things made handcrafted, done the right way. So I'm really happy to start bringing artists into the conversation. I often think that the art is overlooked. People choose their wine mostly based on the label. So I'm happy to welcome Marty here to talk about just a little bit about the design of this label, what her approach is to design, and where you can find some of her other work. So Marta, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay. Well, I'm an artist and architect by education. So I always wanted to do a wine label, but I mostly just did fine art drawings, and that's how I met Chris and Bridget. And I think that was about 10 years ago now. And I think when they bought, it took a while to buy a drawing, but when they finally did, my computer wasn't working, so I wrote my invoice. And they're like, wow, your handwriting is incredible. Would you consider doing a wine label for us? And I'm like, yeah, I would love to do that. So it started, our relationship started that way. That was like just a handwritten label. And then now I've done over 30 different labels for them, and they've become these little canvases of my artwork. And instead of it being a graphic design project, it's really been about this organic process about, you know, what we're feeling about the wine, or if somebody, you know, one of us has some inspirations kind of come out that way. So it's just been this great relationship and friendship that we've just cultivated over this last 10 years. And so it's really fun. And I don't do much, you know, in terms of graphic design for other companies. It's mostly just Chris and Bridget. And then, and then I do my larger scale drawings, primarily, but I love the little canvas.
That's super cool. So Leah has a question for Marta. Leah, take yourself off mute. What's your question?
Oh, I was just wondering if you drank the wine to inspire yourself for the design and when you do the artwork.
Yeah, and we've done like every, you know, now that I'm they're all handwritten, so every year they have to be updated by hand. So sometimes in the beginning I don't get to try the wine, and it's more about you know, thoughts from Chris. And then as the wine, as I get to try it over the years, the labels have developed too. So it's inspired by words or inspired by tasting. And yes, I drink the wine.
Yeah. So what I really like about this label too is that it's almost this inspired by a certain font you've used before, or have you created your own font here?
Yeah, that's my handwriting. So I've just been using that. That's owned now, I think, by Chris and Bridget.
It's super cool because it looks almost like it looks like a professional typed up font, because all of the letters, you know, all the H's of the same, you know, like all the small loops are in the height, that there's height to it.
Well, it's like that's why I brought in the architectural training, because I did train and hand letter, and so I have that kind of rigorous background, and it's become my own thing. And I've tried actually to make a typeface out of it for the computer, so it would make this whole process just a little easier. And there's something that's beautiful just about the handwritten nature of how things change and just little tweaks, and it just doesn't look right, you know, on the computer. So it's all, you know, it's all just unique per label.
Yeah, and I don't know if you can see, she does, this is kind of like one of the, similar to the first drawing, I think, that we got for the tasting room, the large art piece. So I think it kind of shows just kind of like a lot of the hand detail that goes into it. So yeah, you can't have too much to drink or too much caffeine or anything to kind of do this, because there's a lot of lines and
I celebrate after.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. So Marta, where can we find your other artwork? Do you have a website?
Yeah, I do. You can find me through the Broc website. There's a link on there, so that's the easiest way.
All right.
And I'm updating.
What's the link? What's the link? I'll put it in the recap email.
What's the link, Chris? Is it just Broc?
I think it's just martajohansson.com, right? Or
ours
is
website.
Brocwellers.com.
Yeah, if you go to Broc Cellars, there's a label artist thing.
Yeah, it's right at the bottom of the website.
I will definitely find it. Okay.
And then my Instagram handle is just my full name that you see on the screen there on Instagram. So, and I update that regularly. Yeah,
I'm actually quite happy that you do it by hand, because I think it's consistent with the brand of the wine, harvested by hand, made by hand, everything by hand. It's very consistent with it. So, and you're right, there's something that's very, elegant and simple about it, that's really appeals to me.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of my work is inspired by nature, and so this is a good collaboration that we make sense together.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if I can put my finger on it completely, but there's just something about Marta's artwork that just goes so well with the wines. It just seems to work. Like visually, I think you get a sense of what's inside the bottle by looking at the bottle, and I think that's kind of something that's kind of hard to come by sometimes. So it gives people, I think, a visual a clue to what they're about to buy or about to drink, and it just seems to work just great with us. And Marta even did some of these cans for us too, which are a lot of fun as well.
So Chris, how did you decide on sharing this wine with us? And can you also share kind of your line of what's going on right now in 2020?
Yeah. Well, so Chris, he chose this wine for this mailing, and a lot of what we work with I'm originally from Nebraska, and when I was younger, I was just enthralled with like the history of California winemaking. Just like it just some of these old vines, Zinfandels, Carignan. We work with like 110-year-old Grenache Gris and 140-year-old Carignan, and some Chenin, which has been planted in California since 1970. So a lot of it has to just do with the history of California winemaking. And a lot of people talk about this style of wine like it's new, but it's actually, people were doing it 100 years ago, and we're kind of not doing something new, but we're doing something old, and with how we're making it and what we're working with. So it's just kind of keeping that original fascination with where we are, and just trying to keep discovering things. So that is kind of what drives us.
Yeah, delicious. Thank you.
And you distribute in Connecticut?
Yes.
No one does.
Who's your distributor?
I think recently we're in Connecticut. I think with MFW. I'm not sure.
All right, we'll check it out.
I'll make the intro. I'll introduce
Great.
you all via email after this as well. But no, I was very pleased. Like I said, out of all the producers, out of the 6 producers in this package, Chris was the only one I haven't met before. I hadn't met in person. I know everybody else personally, but I actually chose this wine because I did it at a tasting with my distributor, who's a very close friends of mine as well, and I just thought it was a fantastic wine. So I soft launched Leporello's back in December with really no advertising. I sent emails to about 40 people and had a couple of days. And this was one of the first wines that I had, and I was just sort of distributing it and selling it to friends and other people around Sonoma. I live right near the town of Sonoma, and everyone would say, "Hey, do you have any wine for me? You have any wine?" I would distribute this. They would all come back and say, "This wine is fantastic. Where did you get it from?" And I was like, "Berkeley." And they were like, "What, Berkeley?" So actually, I do want to share. I got a couple text messages today or emails about people who could not make it today. So one of them was friends of mine who have a restaurant in Petaluma. Said, "Just drank the Broc Chenin with Korean takeout, delicious." So that was one of them. So it goes with Korean takeout. It also goes with, apparently, my other friend who said I won't be able to make this, but drank the wine last night with some halibut, and it was fabulous. Fabulous.
Oh, yeah.
All caps. Fabulous. So,
Great to hear.
yeah. So the so it coupled with like a few other of my close friends, I was like, well, I haven't actually met Chris yet, Chris Brocway, but I'm getting such a great reception from just the people that I know from that I'm going to include this in the.
Do you want to hear about our pairing?
Yes. What is your pairing?
We have okay, so these are like Norwegian seed crackers. Like, you cannot see them, but they're really good. I'm kind of obsessed with them lately. And Cambazola blue cheese and avocado. And it's a delicious mix and pairing with the Shannon.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Hey, Chris,
We
I
love
have
it.
a question.
We love it.
for
It's
you.
really good.
Chris B, rather, not Chris D. So two things. So the first, we were really excited that Chris D was doing this because we were hoping to have some wineries to check out when we're allowed to leave the house again. So my first question is, do you have a tasting room in Berkeley?
Yes, we have a tasting room. Typically, it's open Friday through Sundays. So kind of used to be just Saturday and Sunday, and then things got a little busier. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Cool.
Yeah, now it's kind of like a shipping office.
Yeah, and then so we'll definitely be there when we can. And the second question is, we were talking about Instagram, and I found your Instagram, and it looks like this was back in 2017, but it looks like you did a tasting in Japan, in Osaka.
Yes, yeah.
What is the natural wine scene in Osaka like? We love Japan, and I didn't even know that they had a scene.
It's our, how do I phrase it? It's our biggest account or place or whatever. I don't. We've been selling to wine to Japan. Have had distribution there since 2013.
Wow.
We were actually supposed to go in February to Japan, Tokyo, and Hokkaido and South Korea, and we canceled the day before we were supposed to leave, just with everything that's going on right now. So we go every year, and typically we'll do Tokyo, Kyoto, Osaka, and then fly up to, or take the train up north, and then usually end up somewhere around Sapporo.
Wow.
And there's a very wine is very big there. They even make wine in Japan, some really amazing wines. And the natural wine scene took off there long before it took off anywhere here in the U.S. So there's a big following, and I think part of the reason is lower sulfur and lower alcohol work really well in that country, in that market, and it goes really well with the food there. So it's been a surprise, a pleasant surprise, because you always want to have your wines be places you want to go visit. So we go to visit as much as we can.
Yeah, we try to do the same. So my last follow-up question is, I think we're still hoping to go to Tokyo later this year. We were going for the Olympics. It got canceled, but we're still going to try to go.
Yeah.
Where's the natural wine spot or spots in Tokyo that you'd recommend we go check out?
Oh, in Tokyo, a lot of the places that I'm trying to think of our favorite spot, and it's a guy in a neon sign, and I think Bridget, what's that natural wine bar that we always try to go to? A hero store. So AHIRO, a hero store. And the best time to go is like at 5:30 if you can get in. And his sister, it's a brother sister. The sister makes the bread. The brother buys the natural wine. It's just like a cool spot. You have to go there. And then the place we go to the most is Wine Boutique. It's basically a shoebox that could probably fit about 4 people inside. that has just natural wines by the glass. I won't. It's like this notorious kind of alley, kind of like back in the days, kind of like a down and out alley, and it's just like all these little tiny restaurants, bars, and there's just like a string of them. And Wine Boutique is just like an awesome little place to go to right outside of Shibuya, I believe.
Okay, cool. How do you spell that? Wine Boutique.
Bouti, and then this is where I start to lose it. ELLE, I think. That's close enough, I think, for you to.
Yeah, we'll look. I'm
I
glad you
found it.
remember
I
the
found
first
it.
thing, because the bar in Tokyo with the neon sign was not going to narrow it down.
Yeah.
Cool.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I find it. Thank you. We'll try to go this year.
Yeah, there's tons of other places. So, if you ever get, you can email me at chris@broccellars.com. I have a full list.
We will email you, absolutely.
Yeah, and I'll send you something back. But those are the two that come off the top of my head right there.
Cool. Thank you so much. I know that probably wasn't helpful for everybody, but.
I'm definitely interested in that as well. So thank you for that.
No, that was fantastic. Awesome. Any other questions for Chris or Marta?
Actually, I had one quick question, just in general. So there are a couple of wineries in Napa that have done like the same grape planted at different terroirs, just to kind of compare how that affects. Has anybody done the same grape like back to back in the same terroir, but grafted versus ungrafted on different rootstocks, just to kind of see, like, you can imagine that changes stuff, but it could also not. So I'm just kind of curious, like, if you know.
Yeah. I mean, it would definitely change the way not only it grows, but the way it tastes. We've never really experimented too much in a limited area, and especially not with ungrafted vines, because those are so hard to find. Now, that's not to say we don't work with ungrafted vines. The 140-year-old, it's probably 145-year-old Carignan vineyard is all ungrafted. And so with a lot of these old vine plantings, the reason they're still around is because they're usually on sand. So, because phylloxera can't survive in sand. So if you see an old vine vineyard, typically, it's going to be on sandy loam. So, and because of that, I just think it makes a more unique wine. Nobody, it's the thing, like France doesn't talk about it. They're all on, American rootstock is just not discussed, right?
Right.
And here you can still find some of these ungrafted, but we just like the old tried and true St. George, which has been around, for decades, so we don't really have a lot of, since we're dealing with a lot of plantings from like 1950, a lot of what we have is like St. George. And I just like those, if it's grafted onto something.
Yeah. So actually that is I'm going to make a tangent on that as well. It's interesting. So Shannon is grafted on St. George. Is that what you said, Chris?
This is, well, I mean, it's grafted on top of Pinot Gris, and I believe this is like, there's two different sections that we kind of grafted, and one section is St. George, and the other one's a mix of different ones, but they're not defined, or it's not organized in any way.
That's why I think the grafting is really interesting. And Devin, I'm sorry to get to your question in the chat, but I'm glad you brought it up, because the Syrah that we're going to have next Friday from Absentee Winery is on St. George as well. So you're seeing different, the root stocks and what's on the grapes. They're not, when grafting comes into play, they're not one for one. Exactly. So
yeah, usually with the rootstock, it's more of what allows the vine to survive, how much water or how little water, and we've seen a few examples over the years where that hasn't worked out, and it's not pretty.
Awesome. That's been fantastic. Any other questions? What other questions do people have?
I just wanted to say thank you so much to Marta for being here to talk about the art on the label. It's a really, I mean, I did a happy dance when I saw, in particular, your handwriting is
See, if I
phenomenal.
could get this typeset in my fonts, this would be.
Yeah.
No, you cannot.
I would totally use it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really extraordinary.
And actually, like, so the more I drink the wine, the more I realize that I'm smiling.
It's working. Good.
Yeah, the upward motion of my face matches the upward motion of the font. So that's it's making me happy.
Totally. Yeah.
Chris,
too.
what should we expect for our next tasting? I don't even know when it is, but any suggestions on food we should prepare for it, or?
Yeah, so the next tasting is tomorrow night. The next tasting is Sonoma Mountain Winery. It is a Merlot. So Dan Marioni is going to be joining us. I did ask a few of the producers about food or pairing recommendations. So rather than just put out my own, I think whatever you'd like to have with Merlot, I think would be appropriate. They were going to what they had recently. I think they wanted to recommend a drunken goat cheese. I wasn't sure how serious that was, but probably will pair well with it, Merlot anyway. But so the next one is actually tomorrow night, so Thursday, and then we'll have the third one will be Sunday night. So that is the next cadence.
I appreciate that you are avoiding everybody's busy Friday, Saturday night, other video chat schedules.
Exactly, yeah. Because my schedule is crazy on Friday.
To be perfectly honest, I didn't choose the dates. I put out the calendar, which included the Friday, Saturday nights, and it was more about the availability of the producers.
Okay.
Producers.
Chris, we're kidding. It's just a joke.
Yeah.
No, but it's actually, I'm laughing because it is funny that someone signed up for a date and forgot that it was actually his anniversary. So even under quarantine, he was going to get in trouble if he didn't switch it. So I had to broker switching dates with some producers to save an anniversary dinner. So this is what comes with being in the wine business.
Or lockdown, whatever.
Well, yeah, or lockdown. Yeah.
Great. Well, this has been awesome. I look forward to seeing everybody back again tomorrow. Who's coming back? Marta, thank you very much. Chris, Brocway, thank you very much. I mean, I learned a lot. I hope everyone else did. This has been great.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Thank
you very much.
Bye, everybody. Thank you so much. Bye, Marta.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.